Olá, gente, boa tarde. Olá a todas, a todos e a todes. Bem-vindos ao nosso webinar rumo à criação do Comitê Interamericano para a Prevenção e Eliminação do Racismo, Discriminação Racial e Todas as Formas de Intolerância. Uma análise de como a ratificação da CIRDI pode contribuir para o avanço na luta contra o racismo e discriminação racial nas Américas. Esse evento está sendo realizado entre nós, da Race and Equality, com o apoio da Comissão Interamericana de Direitos Humanos, e contamos também com interpretação simultânea em espanhol, português e inglês, via Zoom. É um prazer tê-los aqui conosco. Esse evento também está sendo transmitido no Facebook, nosso canal, e para a abertura do nosso evento agora, eu vou esperar as pessoas entrarem durante um pouquinho mais de tempo e vamos chamar o nosso diretor executivo, Carlos Quezada, para fazer a nossa abertura do webinar.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Well, good afternoon. I would like to thank our brave partners from the region, Aniele Franco, who's going to join us in a minute, from the Marielle Franco Institute from Brazil, Dayana Blanco, Executive Director of ILEX, Colombia, and Manuel de Jesus Dandre, Executive Director of the Jacques View Network from the Dominican Republic. And of course, our longtime friend, allied, and accomplice in this historical struggle to combat racial discrimination in the region, Ms. Margaret May Macaulay, Rapporteur on the Rights of Afro-Descendants and Against Racial Discrimination from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. And the Commission actually for not only being here, but also for co-hosting the event. When I was drafting these remarks, I realized that for the first time in many years, I personally will focus on something positive, on the advances made and opportunities ahead for those of us working to eliminate, prevent, and punish racial discrimination in the region, especially the developments in the last 2 years. The murder of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020, and the following mass protest worldwide marked a breaking point, calling for an urgent, systematic, and intersectional response to systematic racism in law enforcement. This racism is systematic in the excessive use of force and other violations of international human rights law against people of African descent by law enforcement officials, as well as the challenges that victims and their families face in the pursuit of justice. As part of the global response to this crisis, on July 2021, during the 47th session, the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted by consensus resolution 4721 on the, quote, promotion and protection of the human rights and fundamental freedoms of Africans and people of African descent against excessive use of force and other human rights violations by law enforcement officers through transformative change for racial justice and equality. This is a historic resolution that was made only possible because of the resilience and strength of victims of systematic racism in law enforcement, their families, and human rights defenders around the world that work together in an anti-racism coalition. The adoption comes after the Human Rights Resolution 43.1 and subsequent report of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the 4-point agenda towards transformative change for racial justice and equality. The analysis made by the Office of the High Commissioner showed that systematic racism often manifests itself in pervasive racial stereotypes, prejudice, and bias, and is frequently rooted in stories and legacies of its enslavement, the transatlantic trade in enslaved Africans, and colonialism. It also states that systematic racism is shaped by intersection of multiple identities, including sex, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, nationality, migration status, disability, religion, socioeconomic, and other status. But greatly, for us in the region, a ray of light to improve the rights of Afro-descendants in the Inter-American system came in 2013 with the approval of an Inter-American Convention against Racism, Racial Discrimination, and Related Forms of Intolerance. As we call it here in Race and Equality, the CIRDI, by the General Assembly of the OAS. CIRDI is maybe the best complementary convention in the Inter-American system to the American Convention on Human Rights that we have to combat racial discrimination in the Americas, including, of course, within the administration of justice. The treaty came into force, but so far has only been ratified by 6 countries and needs to be implemented. Recently, last week, in fact, we had a thematic hearing in which we talked and raised awareness and our concerns about the lack of implementation by Uruguay, the second country to ratify the convention. I'm not going to talk about the specific situations of the countries like Brazil, Colombia, or the Dominican Republic, because we have invitees here for that. What I would like to mention here is a little bit about how this intertwines, so to speak, with the situation of Afro-LGBTI population. So the Afro-LGBTI population in Brazil, Colombia, and the Dominican Republic lives in a context of great violence as well. According to a report from Grupo Gay de Bahia, GGV, an LGBTI person is killed every 26 hours in Brazil. In 2019 alone, there were 329 violent deaths. And a report from the National Association of Transgender and Transsexuals of Brazil, ANTRA, they documented in 2019 124 killings, 75% of them Black or Afro-Brazilians. Where are the opportunities here? We need to take advantage of a newly created mechanisms along with the ones already established at the UN level, including the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, CIRDI, where we have great allies today. Ms. Kay McDougall, a US member of the committee, is a great ally of the Afro-descendant movement in the diaspora, including Latin America. We have now a permanent forum of people of African descent at the United Nations, which is a consultation mechanism for people of African descent and other policy stakeholders that will contribute to the elaboration of an UN declaration whose main objective is to create a legally binding instrument for the promotion of Afro-descendants. And we have another great ally there, Epsi Campbell, current Vice President of Costa Rica and recently elected member of the forum, along with the African-American professor, Justin Hansford. We cannot let this opportunity pass by. Furthermore, we have Tendaye Ashumi, the UN Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Racism, Racial Discrimination, and Related Forms of Intolerance. We also have this 3-member racial justice mechanism at the United Nations created by the Resolution 4721, including Professor Juan Mendez, that will examine the root causes of racism in law enforcement and the criminal justice system. And finally, we have a great ally that's going to stay with us for the next 2 years. Margaret May McConley, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, and the Rapporteur on the Rights of Afro-Descendants of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. We have a great opportunity in the next 2 years before the end of the decade to ratify and implement the Inter-American Convention Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, and Related Forms of Intolerance. And more importantly, because the event is around this, I didn't say anything about it because some other people are going to talk about it, is that according to the Article 15 of the Convention, an Inter-American Committee for the Prevention and Elimination of Racism, Racial Discrimination, and all forms of discrimination and intolerance will be established after the 10th ratification, and it will be comprised of 1 expert appointed by each of the state parties that have ratified the convention. So this committee will be responsible for monitoring the commitments undertaken in the Inter-American Convention. It's very important, and I think this will be in alignment with our campaign, the CIRDI campaign. So follow us at www.cirdi2024.org to know more about the CIRDI campaign. So thank you very much to everybody here, and back to you, Natalie. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, Carlos. Gostaria de lembrá-los também que tanto os palestrantes quanto o público podem fazer perguntas no chat e a gente vai direcionar ao final da fala de cada palestrante. Para falar agora sobre a importância da adoção do mecanismo regional de monitoramento para combater o racismo e a discriminação racial, a gente convida a Daiane Blanco. Ela é cofundadora da organização colombiana Eliminación Jurídica. Ela é mestre em Direito pela Universidade da Califórnia e especializada em Direito do Entretenimento e Estudos Raciais Críticos. Muito bem-vinda, Daiane. Muito obrigada pela sua colaboração.
Gracias, Natalie. Gracias al Instituto y a las demás organizaciones que han hecho este espacio posible. Creo que hemos venido tratando de construir redes y fuerzas para lograr finalmente no solo la ratificación de la Convención Interamericana, la CIRDI, sino también su correcta implementación. En varios espacios hemos insistido en que algunos países como Colombia, que es el país desde el que trabajamos con activación jurídica, tenemos, si se quiere, normativas que propenden por la igualdad y la no discriminación, lo tenemos en nuestra Constitución, y esto contempla a un Estado que debe velar por la supremacía de los derechos inalienables de la persona, por respeto a la dignidad humana y por la protección a la diversidad étnica y cultural de la nación. Tenemos al lado de los artículos constitucionales una serie de leyes que esperan también fortalecer la lucha contra el racismo y la discriminación en Colombia. Después de la firma de la convención, el país ha esperado alrededor de 4 años, si no es más, para su eventual ratificación. Y el año pasado, después de 2 debates de control político, después del junte de varias organizaciones de la sociedad civil, se logró que en el Congreso de la República se presentara el proyecto para la ratificación. Este proyecto para la ratificación se presentó el 16 de diciembre, pero aún continuamos las organizaciones de la sociedad civil a esperas de la anhelada ratificación, porque el proyecto no ha pasado por el procedimiento natural de los debates en el Congreso. Este proyecto se ha mostrado tal vez como un triunfo del gobierno, pero realmente va a ser un triunfo de la sociedad civil en Colombia si se logra eventualmente la ratificación. En principio, frente al proyecto, hay algunos comentarios que son de tipo, más que todo, del reconocimiento de la existencia del racismo y la discriminación en Colombia, el reconocimiento de que este es un fenómeno que está amarrado a la estructura de la sociedad colombiana, el reconocimiento de ese fenómeno como un hecho amarrado a la estructura de la sociedad colombiana. Nos va a permitir no solo ampliar el entendimiento de por qué es necesaria la convención, sino también nos va a permitir garantizar su correcta implementación. Algunos de los comentarios que hemos hecho al lado de la necesidad de la firma, al lado de la necesidad de la implementación y la ratificación, es que hay una fuerte necesidad de socialización de esta convención con la sociedad colombiana, con las organizaciones de la sociedad civil, para que sepamos a ciencia cierta para qué nos sirve un instrumento de estos, cuáles son los cambios que se presentan en relación con otros que ya existen y han sido incorporados al ordenamiento colombiano, como pueden ser la otra convención, que es la Convención Internacional para la lucha contra el racismo y la discriminación. ¿Cómo se diferencian estos dos mecanismos? ¿Cómo se diferencia el comité que se pretende crear en esta Convención Interamericana con el que ya existe, con el CED, y que este sea un instrumento que podamos usar las organizaciones de la sociedad civil, que tengamos a la mano y que sepamos cómo nos beneficia? Y también es importante poner a conversar esta convención con otros instrumentos que ya existen y que están más en el ADN del funcionamiento del Estado colombiano. Esto de cara claramente a las necesidades de Colombia como país en relación con la superación de la discriminación y el racismo, que no se limita a la CIRDI, no se limita a la Convención Interamericana. Esto requiere una transformación absoluta de la sociedad colombiana, de sus instituciones, y de leer cómo el racismo y la discriminación racial contra las personas de descendencia africana, contra las mujeres negras afrodescendientes, los hombres negros afrodescendientes, las personas trans negras afrodescendientes, ha permeado incluso las instituciones del Estado. Es decir, no solamente la ratificación de la convención, sino su correcta implementación deben llevarnos también a conversar con los otros instrumentos que tenemos en el país, con las leyes que tenemos en el país, poder hacer el análisis desde las organizaciones de la sociedad civil, desde el gobierno, desde la misma sociedad, si los instrumentos que tenemos aquí en el país para la lucha contra la discriminación racial y el racismo son suficientes o nos siguen faltando aún otros, no solo desde las leyes y la norma, porque el derecho no es la única herramienta de transformación y de cambio. Los mecanismos internacionales y los órganos internacionales no son los únicos que pueden ayudar a hacer transformación, pero sí son una herramienta fundamental para que mezclados con otros logremos transformación. Por ejemplo, esta es una herramienta que hay que mezclar con estrategias de formación, de educación para la sociedad colombiana en esta lucha constante y permanente contra el racismo y la discriminación. Muchas gracias.
Muito obrigada, Dayana. Muito obrigada pelas suas considerações. Eu acredito que, felizmente, os quadros de racismo estrutural têm muitos pontos em comum, seja na América do Sul e na América Central. E exatamente para continuar a falar sobre isso, a gente vai convidar agora Manuel de Jesus André para falar sobre contribuições da CIRDI para fortalecer o trabalho dos estados na luta contra o racismo e a discriminação racial. O Manuel, ele é diretor executivo da Rede de Encontro Dominicano Haitiano Jacques Vieux, da República Dominicana, e membro do Movimento Sociocultural para Trabalhadores Haitianos. Muito obrigada, Manuel, seja bem-vindo.
Muchísimas gracias a usted, Natalie, y los demás integrantes de este panel. Gracias al Instituto por permitirnos compartir algunas ideas que son muy parecidas a la que ponía la compañera de Colombia. Vamos a comenzar dándole una pequeña cifra que salió la semana pasada, donde solo el 8% de los dominicanos se consideran negros en un país eminentemente afro. Solo el 8%. Ya desde ahí ustedes pueden imaginarse el terrible, el tremendo esfuerzo que le tocará a la sociedad civil y a los que creemos en un mejor trato a la persona tenemos por delante. Es un compromiso de primer orden. Este estudio se hizo, en la conmemoración del Día Internacional contra la Discriminación Racial, que celebraron un encuentro que se llamó el Ruido de los Tambores. O sea, que estaba la vicepresidenta de Costa Rica acá en Santo Domingo. En la República Dominicana, donde los afrodescendientes representamos la inmensa mayoría de la población, no hay un reconocimiento real de esa característica tan fundamental y tan importante para impulsar una lucha en contra de la discriminación racial. Según el estudio de referencia, el 45% de los dominicanos se consideran indios. No sé si los hermanos latinoamericanos entienden, es una categoría de color en República Dominicana. Inclusive, la difunta Sonia Pierre tuvo una gran lucha y finalmente se logró que el documento de identidad ya no se pone ese tipo de nomenclatura. También se dijo que el 18% se considera blanco, el 16% moreno, que es otra categoría característica étnica muy dominicano, moreno. Pero el moreno tiene una ubicación geográfica que es fronterizo. Es fronterizo porque del otro lado tenemos Haití, que no tiene ningún problema con la cuestión del color, hasta ahora ampliamente conocido. Y el 9% mulato. Para mí, el primer gran problema que tenemos en República Dominicana es el reconocimiento. Reconocer que existe un problema con la identidad racial en el país. Y hasta tanto no se resuelva ese problema, entonces tendremos dificultad para asumir. Pero yo creo que estamos dando paso, porque en la discusión parlamentaria está un proyecto de ley sobre discriminación. Y aunque no hemos avanzado lo suficiente, pero por lo menos está en la discusión. Por ejemplo, el profesor sociólogo Rubén Sillier, comentando esas cifras, decía, en República Dominicana todos somos afrodescendientes, porque si vemos el porcentaje, diríamos, caramba, pero este es un país totalmente de blanco. No. Es que es un país mayoritariamente y absolutamente afro. Entonces, tenemos que trabajar duro para que eso se comprenda y no quedarnos solamente en lo que es en los prejuicios raciales, porque hay racismo y hay discriminación fuerte, y ya eso ha sido estudiado, y el Sistema Interamericano de Derechos Humanos ha tenido la oportunidad de examinar diferentes aspectos en cuanto a esa temática. Por ejemplo, el caso de la cuestión de la nacionalidad, el asunto de las expulsiones, las bases sobre las que se fundamenta ese tipo de política pública, nos deja bien claro la existencia de problemas de discriminación. Aunque hemos avanzado poco, porque en el 2010 ya la discriminación pasó a ser un tema constitucional en la República Dominicana. El artículo 39 de la Constitución Dominicana da la definición prácticamente clásica de lo que es la discriminación, planteando que todas personas nacen libres e igual ante la ley, reciben la misma protección y trato de las instituciones, autoridades y demás personas, y gozan de los mismos derechos, libertades y oportunidades, sin ninguna discriminación por razones de género, color, edad, discapacidad, nacionalidad, vínculos familiares, lengua, religión, opinión política, filosófica, condición social o personal. Entonces, esa es la definición prácticamente clásica de lo que es la discriminación. Sin embargo, las condiciones jurídicas y administrativas para que ese planteamiento, que se podemos decir filosófico, de término constitucional, para que eso se haga realidad, falta mucho por hacer. Y justamente revisando los planteamientos de la CIRDI, de esta Convención Interamericana, vemos que representaría para la República Dominicana una gran oportunidad para avanzar en esa temática. Y no decir, en cuanto al comité, la República Dominicana tendría un aliado para la formación, para la capacitación, para la educación y para, ¿por qué no?, preparar la sociedad civil para hacer una mejor intervención en cuanto a esas dos herramientas que tendremos, que ya tenemos la convención a disposición. Ojalá que el país, con el esfuerzo que desplegaremos la sociedad civil, pueda firmar y ratificar la convención y ser parte y reconocer el futuro comité que estaría a cargo de monitorear la correcta aplicación de esa convención. La República Dominicana, ser parte de estos mecanismos, sería una de gran ventaja para la población, que necesita de mucha formación para que pueda reclamar sus derechos. La discriminación y la discriminación tiene por consecuencia limitar limitar seriamente el respeto de los derechos humanos. Entonces, esperamos que la República Dominicana, con todo el esfuerzo que desplegaremos, pueda ser parte de esta convención lo antes posible. Muchísimas gracias.
Muito obrigada, Manuel. Eu acredito que realmente são pontos que são incomuns para toda a América Latina. Aproveitando para fazer essa introdução para a próxima fala, a gente também no Brasil tem muitos problemas com relação à forma como a sociedade se identifica, realmente a população começar a identificar como população negra, com base nas estatísticas que a gente tem do nosso instituto, que é chamado de IBGE, é uma coisa recente, mas ainda são políticas muito conversadas no Brasil. E a CIRDI realmente tem sido uma conquista para a gente no combate ao racismo, e a nossa conversa de hoje é exatamente para isso, né? Nós esperamos que a efetivação da CIRDI realmente alcance bases estruturais da sociedade, né? Que não sejam só políticas fora de uma estrutura nacional, mas que também alcancem as estruturas da sociedade como um todo. Agora, para falar sobre violência policial contra a população negra e necessidades de monitoramento nacional e regional, a gente convida a Aniele Franco. A Aniele é diretora executiva do Instituto Marielle Franco no Brasil. Bem-vinda, Aniele, muito obrigada pela sua colaboração.
Imagina, obrigada pelo convite, Nathalie, você é linda, quero deixar aqui registrado isso. É um prazer estar aqui, Carlos, Margarete, tantas outras pessoas que têm aí construído conosco, né? Eu estou em São Paulo, já peço perdão caso falhe a internet ou algo parecido, que eu estou transitando de uma reunião para outra, mas queria muito estar aqui, primeiro porque vocês são muito parceiros, a gente tem construído e tem feito coisas incríveis juntas, mas segundo porque é um tema que nos atravessa muito, né? Eu sou a Aniele, eu sou cria da Maré, e esse tópico de violência policial sempre nos corta, porque desde a infância a gente vivencia isso, né? Na própria pele, na própria criação, de passar diariamente e fugir de bala perdida, e fugir de operações, e ter atritos quando a gente não conseguia ou ir para a escola ou voltar do trabalho. Mas, paralelo a isso, eu acho que a gente tem alguns tópicos para abordar aqui nesse tempo de hoje que eu acho que é importante falar. O primeiro quando a gente vem no âmbito de pandemia, né, em 2020, que a gente tem uma DPF que proíbe, né, operações policiais, e que durante esse momento, esse período, a gente tem uma chacina no Jacarezinho, a gente tem uma mulher negra grávida que é, infelizmente, né, assassinada ali com bala perdida ou achada, como a gente costuma dizer, é algo que traz a gente pensar em como que a gente vive num estado onde corpos negros são considerados tão vulneráveis e descartáveis, principalmente para quem deveria estar nos protegendo. Acho que esse é o primeiro ponto. Acho que tem uma outra coisa muito importante para ser dita, que hoje, né, agradecer aqui a Fabi, a gente estava falando sobre isso, trocando sobre isso agora há pouco, que é trazer a decisão de hoje, que é um dos desdobramentos da DPF, né, que tem aí um plano para a redução de letalidade policial. Então, que inclusive várias organizações fazem parte dessa construção, e o quanto é importante a gente estar pensando cada vez mais lugares importantes, mas lugares com os nossos corpos. E aí, quando a gente para pensar, por exemplo, agora a gente vem na comitiva do Movimento Negro vindo da Colômbia, tem uma companheira aqui, né, que falou anteriormente, então, ter vivenciado e ter visto a campanha da Francia Marques como esse símbolo de potência, como esse símbolo de resistência, como esse símbolo de ter uma mulher negra adentrando nesse espaço, nesse lugar, traz também para a gente aqui um respiro de ares e pensar ares melhores, né, chegando para nós. Eu não tenho uma resposta formulada ou algo correto que eu diria sobre como a gente combate, como a gente termina com essa violência policial, principalmente contra o povo negro, mas algo que eu sempre penso, principalmente após a perda da minha irmã, é quando que nós teremos políticas públicas eficazes que vão pensar, né, em pautar tópicos como esse. Como que a gente vai ter segurança para entrar e sair da favela onde a gente mora e olhar para um lado e pensar, não, eu posso entrar e sair seguramente. Então, a gente tem feito tantas coisas, né, que perpassam por, desde a violência policial, a violência política no Instituto Marielle Franco, com parceria, inclusive, de instituições e organizações que estão aqui, pessoas que estão aqui, mas é um assunto que me atravessa muito. Assim. Quando eu tinha 17 anos, antes um pouquinho de ir para os Estados Unidos, eu e a Mari, a gente perde uma amiga com 2 tiros na cabeça de bala perdida dentro da Maré. E naquele dia, a Marielle falou para mim assim, eu vou mudar esse lugar aqui, eu ainda volto para a Maré mudando esse lugar. E, de fato, ela muda aquele lugar e muda não só a Maré, mas como o Brasil e o mundo inteiro. Mas também é vítima de uma violência brutal que não sabemos de onde veio, mas lembrar que as 2 pessoas que hoje estão presas são 2 policiais aposentados, né? E estão aí esperando o júri. Mas a gente segue sem saber quem mandou matar a Marielle. Então, que não tenhamos mais outras Marielles, que não tenhamos mais Ágatas, João Pedros, que a gente possa ter nossas crianças, nossas mulheres grávidas, nosso povo preto a salvo quando entrar e sair. Eu acho que a violência policial que ocorre hoje no Brasil, de forma geral, é algo que tem que ser extinguido, tem que acabar. A gente não tem mais nenhum tipo de, enfim, força, eu diria, para continuar convivendo com algo que é tão cruel com o povo negro quanto isso. Eu acho que essa é a minha primeira contribuição. Mais uma vez, agradecer a participação, dizer que tanto o Instituto quanto a família da Mari, a gente está sempre à disposição para construir, trocar, pensar com vocês e seguir caminhando firmemente. Obrigada.
Muito obrigada, Aniele. São excelentes apontamentos, realmente. A contribuição da Marielle e do Instituto Marielle Franco no combate à violência policial e no combate ao racismo no Brasil tem sido fundamental. E não só no Brasil, né? Ecoa tão forte que tem sido destaque na Europa, aqui nos Estados Unidos, e a nossa ideia é continuar trabalhando em conjunto com vocês para que as políticas antirracistas sejam realmente efetivas, né? E agora, para falar um pouquinho sobre os passos a seguir, os próximos passos a seguir para avançar na agenda da CIRDI, e rumo à criação desse Comitê Interamericano de Prevenção e Eliminação do Racismo, da Discriminação Racial e Todas as Formas de Tolerância. A gente tem o prazer de convidar a comissária Margaret Macaulay, ela é relatora sobre os direitos das pessoas afrodescendentes e contra a discriminação racial na Comissão Interamericana de Direitos Humanos. Como eu falei, a comissão é a nossa parceira nesse evento. Muitíssimo obrigada pela sua participação e pelo apoio de sempre, comissária.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Good afternoon, everyone. I have to particularly greet Carlos Caseda, where I have been working closely with the Institute because of him since I joined the Commission in 2016. And as he mentioned earlier, I shall be working closely with you all until I end my 2nd term in 2 years. So I hope we can succeed at a much quicker pace than we have achieved so far. It is more than past due for there to be racial equality in our region. This is a truth that cannot be denied. Without the slaves, the enslaved, and so on, who were brought from Africa, and the indigenous peoples in this region, the development which has been achieved would not have been achieved. This is also a truth we must recognize and accept, and the powers that be ought to do so. Then perhaps we will have a faster rate of ratification. As you know, presently there are only 6 states which have ratified the convention and 12 which have signed. This is too slow. And it is unconscionable of them to move at such a pace. So clearly we need an independent, autonomous body made up of 7 independent peoples who are their affinity to the subject of racial equality and non-discrimination on a racial basis must be overtly provable and proved, because we need people like that who are strong and independent-minded, who will push and in their monitoring of the actions of the state. That is a very important step. And we're still short of 4 ratifications in order to achieve that goal of the setting up of this committee. And therefore, what steps should we take? We have to try to get those 4 ratifications this year and more. And it falls to all of us. We're all responsible to try to effect this. And we should try to speak to the 6 countries, 6 states which have ratified up to now, to join with us in a mechanism and process which would enable other states to ratify. Because let's face it, a good number of the states in our region have within their constitutions and other laws provisions relating to equality and non-discrimination on racial lines. Yet, not one of them can say that they have a racist-free environment within their state borders. Not one. We see it every day. All the speakers have referred to incidents that have happened. And of course, we had an awakening when George Floyd was killed. In the face of the world, all of us witnessed the killing of this Black man by 4 non-Black policemen. And one in particular who had his knee on his neck for almost 9 minutes. I never thought I would live to see that, but we all did. And that did awaken the issue of racial discrimination. It is clear that the state will not succeed in moving towards equality on a racist basis in any of our states unless we have this committee, which would monitor their actions, their policies, their laws, their police, their judges, every single facet of governance within their states and activity, and comment on their effect, whether they are racially based or not. And so they will analyze how the states are succeeding in implementing their obligations under the convention. We don't have that now. Apart from the work we're doing with race and equality, leading it, at least with the commission, working in partnership with all of us. But we need the strong voice of independent, strong persons in an official organization of OAS committee in pursuit of this absolutely step which should have been achieved a long time ago. And the decade is almost at an end. We're coming to the end. So how are we going to look each other in the face if the decade comes up and we haven't got this committee in place, and which should have been acting before the decade comes up. The end of it comes up. So we have to move, we have to ensure that states move towards this objective. It has to be a primary objective of the OAS, and we have to make it so. How we do it, we will have to use lots of means. And Carlos is not a stranger to the use of encouraging means in order to get states to act in particular ways, and or to stop acting in particular ways. We need this committee of experts who will be experts and strong. And for instance, there's a new use of language, new concepts within the convention, which have to be promoted, and promoted by strong adherents. And that is within, in Brazil, academics and social society who are using in the public agenda the concept of racial genocide, which has been in existence for a while, but which is not in common use. And it ought to be, because there was racial genocide and there is racial genocide going on. And in Brazil, in the favelas, not only by police, but other security forces, the army and so on. In Colombia recently, and so on. We could name and just go on naming it. And we must remember that the Inter-American Court has recognized that the doctrinal evolution of the approach of integration, intersectionality, exists and is present within the application and actions of states. And because of the court has decided in several cases that there are social inequalities which originate from the intersection of factors such as gender, ethno-racial background, national origin, sexual orientation, migratory status, socioeconomic status, etc., which trigger, it seems, in the minds and actions of so many persons, actions of discrimination and violence. So it is in our jurisprudence, and we must go ahead with it and make states recognize that this is so, and why they must be part of the in-group, the 6 countries which have ratified, and implement, because ratification is just a start. And they must implement all the provisions in the convention. They must educate their citizens. They must educate their officers. In fact, they must educate the entire populace of their country on the provisions, standards, principles within the convention. That they must do. And we're all sort of doing like PowerPoints, quick and necessary. Another thing which must be done is to recognize the significant contribution which the Afro-descendant movement has made to the protection of human rights in our region. We have indeed done good work. And these dates, 21st of March and 25th of March, are very meaningful dates, which we must always uphold and commemorate and honor the victims who are not gone. Those who went before us are still remembered, and there are those who are still struggling, and all are still waiting to achieve justice. because it is my opinion that most people's human rights violations, which Black people suffer, are definitely only based on the ethno-racial background. But it intersects with other factors. That you're a woman, you're a trans, you're an LGBTI, you are disabled, you are poor. All that conjoined makes the situation of discrimination and violence worse. Today, Afro-descendants and indigenous peoples face the greatest environmental injustice and racism, and name it, religious racism. Every aspect of discrimination you can think of, we face worse than any other group. And those of us who are disabled and poor and trans and migrants and so on, face it maybe quadrupled. And women, for being women, and elderly women, and young women, children, the girl child, all these. So we need this committee. Nobody can gainsay that. We need this committee to move forward, and to move forward in the way we should. I should, finally, let me close up. We must, why should we support the creation of this committee? But we have seen some progress in the eradication of the denials of racism, because there are those who deny that my country is not racist. We have no racism here. In fact, some, when I first joined the commission, denied that there were Black people within their states, in our region. And I said, I couldn't believe that they were doing that. Anyway, but we have been moving, making some progress in that regard. And that for them to even deny the existence of Afro-descendants in their countries. But we need serious and real commitments from the states, plus effective and timely affirmative actions from them in order to move forward. That's one reason we need the committee. And because of the colonialist and slave heritage of every state, there are stereotypes about African descendants which are naturalized and structuralized in the institutions within the states. So these have to be, what's the word I want? Eliminated completely. It can't be eliminized, but eliminated completely. They have to be removed, destructured, and made unnatural and criminal. And many of those stereotypes, the law within those countries says they are unlawful, but they are not treated as such 99.5% of the time, which questions the impartiality of the judicial systems within these countries and the racism which also exists in the application of the law and within the legal system. Therefore, we need an external force like the committee to investigate all these things, to bring it to the attention of the Organization of American States and the world. We need to promote legal, cultural, structural, political, environmental change and systems reform to combat and eradicate these all these forms of racial and general discrimination. The Inter-American Committee would be very useful in this necessary advocacy work for our region. Otherwise, we will continue in the same way as we are existing now. And existence is no longer enough for us. Thank you.
Muitíssimo obrigada, comissário. Foi realmente excelente sua participação. Eu acho que é importante também a gente lembrar que os Estados partes, eles assumiram realmente a responsabilidade de adotar essas ações afirmativas e políticas públicas para a condição dessas condições, e a gente não pode também ignorar um quadro de racismo institucional que a gente tem em todos os países, né, da América Latina como um todo. Então, eu acho que foram apontamentos muito bons feitos aqui. É muito importante e muito significativo que a gente esteja aqui falando sobre um instrumento que coloca, né, as políticas de direitos humanos de combate à discriminação racial como um marco legal nacional, né, e não como meras políticas de governo. Obrigados a todos, a todas e a todos pela participação no nosso webinar. Para finalizar, então, eu vou convidar novamente o nosso diretor executivo, Carlos Quesada, para falar as últimas palavras do nosso encontro.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Thank you very much, Margaret. We really need you in the region. We need a stronger rapporteur within the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. As we always say, please count on us. I think it's important just to emphasize here two things that we were mentioning. You know, there's still the struggles that Afro-descendant peoples have in the region. You know, Manuel said it, you know, like very, very well. You know, the Dominican Republic is, you know, one of the, if not the only country where you see Afro-descendants discriminated against Afro-descendants in a way that is very shocking for those of us working on racial discrimination. You know, under the curtain of xenophobia, but it's actually racial discrimination too. And, you know, there is like the disproportionate impact of the armed conflict in Afro-Colombian communities has been documented by the Commission, has been documented by the United Nations. And, you know, like, even though there is an ethnic chapter there, there's a lack of implementation. And as the news came out today, also there's a ray of light also in Colombia for the upcoming elections too. And then, you know, Brazil, as Aniele was mentioning, you know, Aniele, just for you to know, Margaret, we brought Margaret McConley to the Favela da Maré 3 years ago. So Margaret knows the Favela da Maré not very well, but we gave her a tour and we had an event there at the Favela da Maré. So she knows the favelas in Brazil, and maybe we can just, you know, it's not super confirmed yet, but there is a, you know, like, well, we're planning, we're in negotiations with the Commission for a promotional visit of Margaret May McCauley to Brazil very soon. Let's put it that way. So this is kind of a, so fingers crossed if everything works. And so I'm pretty sure, you know, not only the Aniele, but other partners from Brazil are gonna be here. I'm gonna be able to meet with Margaret. I just wanted to, before we close, first of all, you know, a big applause, you know, kudos for everybody here. We respected the time. I was very concerned, and those for of you who know me, I was very concerned that the event would go over 1 hour. You know, there is Zoom exhaustion, and having, you know, the level of participation today here, it's great. It shows the motivation, and it shows also the interest and the opportunities to keep working on this. Just to echo Ms. McCauley's words, I think having an Inter-American committee, you know, composed of independent members, you know, to kind of offer advice and technical assistance in consultation with civil society organizations, it's going to be a key element to influence the Organization of American States as a whole and the Inter-American Commission, in particular, precisely because still, organizations like institutions like the Organization of American States, unfortunately, they're not as diverse as we would like the Commission or the OIS to be. So, but we're working on it. And finally, just mention that Brazil, Costa Rica, Uruguay, Ecuador, Mexico, and Antigua and Barbuda are the countries who have ratified the Inter-American Convention so far. So again, go back, if you can go to our website, www.CIRDI2024.org. It's a special website for the campaign. You guys gonna find over there the news about the campaign. And just reiterated, I would like to finish reiterating the fact that we as Race and Equality will never give up. We will never give up to keep combating racial discrimination and taking into account the issue of intersectionality. But for those who have been in the neighborhood for a long time, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, there has been progress, especially in the last 2 years. There has been progress at the UN level. There has been progress at the Inter-American system level. We need to take advantage of this progress. We need to hold the governments accountable based on the commitments they have made, at the UN and at the Organization of American States. Having said that, like having a 1 hour event on Zoom, like after Zoom exhaustion. So congratulations again to everybody. Thank you, everybody who have been listening to us and being here. Margaret, thank you very much. Big hug to you. Big hug to you, Diana, Manuel, and Aniele, and we'll keep working on these issues. Thank you. Take care.
I also thank my specialist, Laura.
Oh, of course, and Laura Morello, exactly.
Yes.
Like the lawyer that works with Margaret and the Inter-American.
Oh, yes, she's fantastic.
Who is actually an Afro-Colombian. That helps,
Yes.
right, Laura? Thank you very much. Okay.
Obrigada a todos e obrigada também à equipe daqui da Race and Equality, a Caleb e Leila, por terem ajudado a gente a fazer esse evento também. Muito obrigada.
Tchau. Tchau. Bye-bye.
Tchau, gente.
Obrigado.
Chao, que estén bien.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.